So we can start. There we go. So thank you everyone for coming tonight. This is our first panel of 2021 for Colorado Headwaters Land Trust. We'll be having monthly panels throughout the year, introducing our supporters and our community to conservation professionals and other folks involved in conservation and the land trust movement. So tonight we are making up a panel that we missed last fall during our Hats Off for Headwaters event in late October, which was unfortunately cut short due to the East Troublesome fire, interrupting everything in Grand County. But today we have Patricia Hesch from the United States Forest Service, Melissa Daruna from Keep It Colorado, and Audrey Volt, a ranching and conservation consultant. Joining us today, and we're going to talk about their roles as conservation professionals and their relationship to the land. So I'll start by introducing each of the three using the bios that they sent in for this panel. And I have a list of questions, but overall for the next hour or so, it'll just be a nice conversation about being a conservation professional. We'll start with Melissa Daruna is the Executive Director of Keep It Colorado, a statewide coalition of conservation organizations, including land trusts and their partners. Melissa joined the conservation community after a decade of working in parks and recreation management and public policy. Melissa loves to elevate the critical work of Colorado's land trusts and educate people on the benefits of private land conservation. What Melissa loves most about conservation is the way it brings people together over their love of and connection to the natural world. Melissa, would you like to add anything to that intro?
Thanks, Jeremy. I'm just thrilled to be here. Also, thank you for having me. I know that there's going to be more questions about the career path and background, so I will leave it there and let you introduce the next panelist.
Okay. Next, we'll go to Patricia Hesch. Patricia is the Land Ownership Adjustment Program Manager for the Rocky Mountain region out of Lakewood, Colorado. She has served in that capacity since 2014 and has over 38 years with the U.S. Forest Service in Michigan, Montana, Colorado, and Wyoming. This includes 10 years as the District Realty Specialist for the Sulphur Ranger District in Granby, Colorado, and a 6-month tour as the Acting District Ranger there in 2020. As the Land Ownership Adjustment Program Manager, she has led the forests of Region 2 through complex land exchanges, conveyances, and purchases, resulting in the acquisition of over $35 million worth of land. In addition to the land's work, her career portfolio includes recreation, timber management, facilities management, and special uses administration. She was a member of Grand County Search and Rescue and West Yellowstone Search and Rescue for 10 years each. She has had her home in Grand County for 23 years and is currently a full-time teleworker there due to COVID work requirements. And Patricia, would you like to add anything?
I think I would just add what is the Rocky Mountain region, and that covers most of the national forests in Colorado, 3 forests in Wyoming, Nebraska, South Dakota, and a tiny little piece of Kansas.
All right, thank you. And finally, Audrey. Audrey Volt has a ranch management and natural resource consulting business and assists landowners to develop and implement land management plans, including range and pasture management, weed control, land improvements, and stocking rates. Audrey also creates baseline documents for conservation easements, including vegetation inventory, geology and soils, hydrology, land condition, conservation values, and mapping. She also works with the Colorado Headwaters Land Trust to annually monitor conservation easements. Audrey has lived in Colorado for 33 years and appreciates conservation efforts to support agriculture, wildlife habitat, open space, and scenic lands. Audrey, anything to add?
No, it's nice to be here. And no, I don't think I need to add anything to that.
All right. Excellent. So we'll start. There we go. We'll start with the first question then. How did each of you get into conservation as a career? And did you happen to go to school for this line of work? And we can start with Melissa.
Thanks, Jeremy. I fell into this in the best ways possible. I did not go to school for conservation work. I have a bachelor's degree in Parks and Rec Management and a law degree. So that was my previous career path. But I was really interested in better understanding this interplay between land protection and rec access. Obviously, access out here in the outdoor rec industry is a big deal for Colorado. And so as I was moving along in my career in Parks and Recreation and working a lot on their public policy, I just became more interested in how are we creating a better balance and how are we ensuring that the conservation efforts are going to, uphold these outdoor places and spaces that we love so much. And so I started working in some coalitions around conservation and helping to reauthorize the Colorado Lottery in 2018, and just started getting more engaged in different opportunities, and was really fortunate when I got some outreach from a few different folks when Keep It Colorado was relaunching and they were looking for some leadership. So I felt really lucky to kind of be able to move into conservation in a way that felt really comfortable for me, because I had a great network of people supporting me and who understood my interest in shifting career paths a little bit. And now I'm in a place where all of that public policy work, that legal background that seems so strange to partner with Parks and Recreation, actually comes together very nicely in this work in supporting this coalition. And obviously there's a lot of public policy that Keep It Colorado does, but there's also just a lot of really interesting collaboration that we do through the coalition and partnerships. So really happy that I kind of had this trip and fall from my park and rec background into more directly conservation work.
Great. Patricia?
I think I'll start with where my interest in the outdoors is rooted, and I would have to say it's in a city park that was right down the block from where I grew up. And so when I see TPL's initiative for the 10-minute walk campaign to get a city park near everybody everywhere that's within 10 minutes of their house, they're really appreciate that effort, because I do believe that's where my interest in the outdoors came from. And then just going through school, we had career interest surveys, and the only thing that ever interested me was conservation, ecology, environmental science, and things like that. So it seemed like wherever I looked, that was what kind of drew me. And I did go to Michigan State University after a brief dabbling in music as a potential career. I realized that wasn't really going to take me anywhere. But I did end up going to Michigan State University and got a degree in forestry. And one day was browsing the jobs board, the bulletin board that we used to have before electronic bulletin boards. And there was an announcement for a cooperative education position with the U.S. Forest Service on the Huron-Manistee National Forest in northern Michigan. And I didn't have any idea what that was going to be about. And I applied for it and I got into the program. And my career has kind of evolved. I've done a little bit of everything, real timber management, logging, tree planting, firefighting, some recreation work. But I have evolved into the land ownership adjustment program, where my focus really is on conserving land for the future. And in my introduction, there was a reference to how many millions of dollars of land I have acquired. And that doesn't really equate to a ton of acres sometimes when land is really expensive, but those acquisitions they're permanent and they're legacy work. And so I really appreciate being able to do that when we purchase something, a piece of land, and I know that it's going to be conserved forever. That is really kind of where my focus has taken me over time. So I think the forestry degree was the root of my education, but pretty much everything else has been on the job education and training and just seeing what's out there to work on.
Okay. And Audrey?
So I went to school in animal science, which was related to livestock production. In California, I went to school at Cal Poly on the Central Coast, and then went to UC Davis and got my master's degree. And I also started out working for the Extension Service, and initially worked statewide in California for 4 years, working with um, livestock producers, ranchers, raising cattle and sheep, doing education programs. It was really the educational aspect of doing some field research. And then I was ready for a change. I was looking for another job. Um, wasn't really planning to come to Colorado, but it was really hard to get a job. I wanted to move to the county level as an extension agent. And in California, those jobs were just really highly coveted. Like the guys, and they were mostly guys, got the jobs and they stayed there until they died. And so, in fact, it was kind of funny because I did part of my job was doing support training for those particular group of guys, and they used to joke that when we had meetings that I was going to put arsenic in their coffee because I wanted one of their jobs. But a job came across my desk one day as an extension agent in Kremlin, Colorado, and I was like, wow, back in the days, like Patricia said, of the actual paper, you had to go and look at the job listing, but it somehow landed on my desk. And so I came to Colorado and started as an extension agent in Kremlin, and I did that for 10 years. Really enjoyed it. And then I morphed into, so I could have a more flexible work situation with my kids, to starting a ranch consulting business and helping people manage their land and doing stocking rates and land improvements. And then as a part of that consulting business, I started doing baseline studies for conservation easements, and really, really enjoyed that work. I think I had done maybe 20 different baselines for the Colorado Headwaters Land Trust. Back in there was a few years there where your predecessors, Jeremy, were cranking them out,
We're trying, we're getting up there.
Well, I mean, that was just a particular unique period for other reasons. Yeah, so I started doing baseline studies and really enjoyed that. And then I've also been doing the annual monitoring for the Headwaters Land Trust of their existing easements. So I went to college for more of livestock management, but I've morphed more into the land management and conservation aspects and really enjoy that.
Great. And before we move on, since you and Patricia both mentioned it, can you explain what extension is? Because as we know, a lot of folks don't know what the extension service is.
Oh, so the land grant university in every state, which in this state is Colorado State University, has an extension service, and they have offices in most every county, and they work directly with people on issues relating to land and farming and ranching and forestry. And the 4-H youth program is also run through the extension service. And they also do issues related to, they used to call home economics, but then it kind of, what do they call that? Consumers studies and yeah.
It's still home ec. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I hear all the time, people say, have a question about horticulture or their trees. And I like probably once a month, I hear somebody say, oh, call the extension office.
And the master gardening classes.
Yep, they do master gardening and yep.
That's great. Well, thank you. And we'll go with you for the next question. What is something that you wish you knew earlier in your career that you know now? And if you can be so specific, how did you come to learn it?
So you want me to go?
Go, sure.
And this was like the one question I had to really think about. I'm like, I had a hard time thinking about something. So one thing that came to mind was that something I wish I had known earlier was that, and this really applies to any career, is that you really have more flexibility in your job and in your career than you think you do. I think when we're young and we get out of college and we start doing something and we're kind of, sometimes we have like sort of tunnel vision that I'm in this particular job and this particular job defines me. But really, because I do have more than a few years under my belt, that I think that you really have more flexibility to change jobs, you can change your career, and you can get more training. You can improve your skills in different ways, and you can take your particular set of skills a lot of different directions. I mean, you're probably a good example of that, Jeremy, because you've done a few different things. But yeah, you take a particular set of skills and you can add to it, because there's always so many opportunities to improve your skill set with training. And you could take that particular set of skills and do so many different things. You have way more flexibility than I ever realized that I did. That was kind of the point for me.
Right. Patricia, would you like to go next?
Sure. And like Audrey, I think that was the hard question for me to kind of narrow it down to, in a long career like mine, what do I wish I knew almost 40 years ago? And it comes down to what we're doing right now is public speaking and communication. I say a lot, and like I am right now. And I did end up going to Toastmasters in Laramie to help with my public speaking. And it's just something I really never saw the value in as a younger person. And I was thinking about this answer and remember back to my days at Michigan State University. Our forestry school was right next to the School of Communications. And I never once went in that door to see what they had to offer. And many times I wish I had. So I would say, just communication in general, but public speaking and being able to express yourself. And we do work with a school in Denver where we get like intern type students as part of their work study. They have to pay for their school. And that is one thing I make those kids do. They're juniors and seniors and high school, and I would make them do just little 3-4 minute presentations in front of our group at work about some little project they're working on, and they struggle with it, but I really wanted to impress upon them the importance of being able to talk to people in many different kind of situations, starting with your job interview. I mean, that's where your career starts, and if you can't talk to people, a panel of people to get a job, you're not going anywhere. So public speaking and communication, I think I wish I'd known how important that was 40 years ago.
Yeah, that was impressed upon me when I started in conservation, that we might know what we're talking about and the philosophy and everything behind it, but people not involved can be completely ignorant of it, and it's important for us to be able to communicate that.
Yep.
That's a great point. Melissa.
Yeah, those are both great ones. My answer to this, as I was thinking about it just the other day, is, I wish that I knew what the options were. I didn't know. Before I landed in Parks and Recreation, I was a psychology major. I didn't know you could get a degree in Parks and Recreation. And then there's now a whole TV series about Parks and Recreation. Like, I just didn't know, and I didn't know the questions to ask or to even ask questions. And then I certainly had no idea the broad options that are available in the conservation space either. And so for me, I think that I just wish that I had known about them or taken more time to investigate that. I will say that I don't know that it would have changed my trajectory. Like, I'm happy that I landed where I did, given that I didn't go to school, for this particular thing. But I think that it's one of those things that I often think about, similar to Patricia, like, if I had knocked on that door, if I had looked at that college instead of this, like, what would I know now, that maybe it took me a really long time to learn. And the only way that I learned this, was kind of by happenstance. And I grew up, I worked in my very small town back in Illinois, Northern Illinois, working for our village department that did like summer camp programs for kids, but I didn't know anybody who had a degree in that space. I didn't know that there were people who had degrees in, the types of sciences that foster whole careers in conservation or in parks and recreation. So that's the thing that I think I wish I would have known before.
Nice. Well, thank you. And this next question ties into that, and I feel that all three of you have already given a load of advice to any potential students or soon-to-be career conservation professionals. But Melissa, what is one piece of advice you would give to someone interested in pursuing conservation as a career? And would that piece of advice change for a high school student, a college student, or perhaps someone considering a second career in conservation?
Yeah, and this is similar advice I've given in, previous conversations, young professionals and in other sectors too, is that you need to get a solid feel for what this work will look like. So if that can be volunteering and or internship opportunities, just starting to do any level of work, I think in that field is really valuable. It's one thing that I didn't do until I got into law school. And then I quickly was like, oh, I don't actually want to be a lawyer. So it was hard. It was a hard lesson to learn. I finished and I did the whole thing and it served me well. But I think that that's a really important piece, is to just start to get your feet wet. And while you're doing that, the other really critical thing is that you build relationships in the industry. And that's been huge. I wouldn't have this position today if I didn't spend so much time building relationships with people that I admired, who had careers that I admired, and who were leaders, in this sector. And I think that that's really critical. And so, I think that when you get further along in your education and you're about to be kind of like launched into the real world and have to find a job, that networking piece, I think, is equally as important as having experience to rely on when you're starting to interview. And so, if you're a high school student, I think that it's most important that you get out and get a feel for it and make sure it's something you want to do, and then find the appropriate paths. And then the only other thing that I've always told people is that most of your skills are transferable. So if you are not in school right now for the exact career you want, don't fret. I think that being able to talk about your skill set and your life experience and how it relates to the job that you want is really important.
That last piece, especially, my bachelor's degree is very remotely related to what I'm doing now. So I appreciate that. Audrey, what piece of advice would you have?
Well, I agree with the what Melissa said about volunteering, and just get into that field however you can, whether it's a low-level job or volunteering or an internship, and actually get in it, do it, look around and talk to the people that are in that field. And one thing that I thought was interesting, because and I've noticed as I've progressed through my career, is when you're starting something like that, looking at a field, talk to the people that are like retirement age and ask them, did you like working in this field? And I have a lot of friends that went into one particular field. I won't say what it is because maybe I don't want to, anyway. And it had a huge level of burnout at like age 45 to 50. They were highly trained, but they got to that middle age and they're just like, I am so bored with this and I hate this. And so I think that's a really useful thing, is talk to people that are in their middle age and closer to retirement age and say, do you like this? And would you recommend that I do it? The other thing is look at the location where the jobs are. If you want, I always wanted to live in a rural area. And so, I loved living in Kremling, and I could do that because of the type of work that I had. But some areas, don't have really a lot of jobs, and some jobs are specific to certain areas. So really think about where exactly you want to live, what kind of lifestyle you want to have, and does the job support that? Well, I guess that brings up the point about salary. Really consider salary, and the career that you're thinking about support the salary that you think you want to make.
That's an important point that I think is missed, at least in my cohort, where we were told to find to work in what we love, and a lot of us burned out quickly because we couldn't afford to keep doing what we loved.
Yeah, one of my college roommates, her father just gave us the best advice. One day he's like, oh, everybody tells you, oh, follow your dreams. And he's like, that's bull crap. You get a job that pays good, and then you'll be able to work the things that you like to do into that.
That's good. And afterwards, I would like to know what field you were referencing that you didn't want to say. Patricia, do you have anything to add? Any advice?
A little building on what they've already said, but what kind of outfit do you want to work for? Check out the, I want to be a conservationist, but do you want to do it for federal agency? And what's your idea of conservation? Is it, actually managing the land? Is it, writing letters to the agencies that manage the lands? Do you want to work for a nonprofit that has a real, maybe narrow kind of mission, or and like yourself, Jeremy, with a local land trust, you're really focused on this county and what goes on here. You're learning from places all around you, but your work is really pretty specific to this county. Same with the Forest Service. Forest Service, you could be all over the country. And there's other nonprofits like Trust for Public Lands and the Conservation Fund, Western Rivers. They are nationwide, and they have a wider range of influence and effect and impact. So what kind of areas do you want to work? What kind of agency do you want to work for? What mission do you want to be working towards? So I think that if I were, beginning a career or advising someone who's beginning her career, just check out the variety of different types of entities you could work for. There's private consultants, a lot of county open spaces now that didn't used to be there 20 or 30 years ago. So really be aware of what those options are. And then for, the person that's toiled away in a career they didn't really care for all their lives, and then they retire and they want to be a park ranger. There's a lot of volunteer opportunities for that, campground hosts and things like that. So even if someone has spent a career doing something totally unrelated and they're in their 50s or 60s or 70s and they go, I'd really like to, give back to the land. There's a lot of Volunteer for Outdoors Colorado. They do week-long trail maintenance gigs you can volunteer for. And the Colorado Trail, I'm actually hiking the Colorado Trail myself over 5 years, but I'm doing it. But they have, week-long work sessions that people can do. So I think there's just a lot of different opportunities out there that didn't used to be there 20 and 30 years ago, and people should just check those out.
That's great. Thank you. And with that, Patricia, how do you see the state of conservation in our communities today, in Colorado, in the country, in the world? Since you have had quite a good career in conservation, I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes.
I think that in general, populations around the world are more aware of the need to be conservationists, and you don't have to have a job like ours to be a conservationist. I mean, you can do your own water conservation and recycling and everything from small things like that to having a career in conservation. So people are really seeing the opportunities to make a difference at the home level and individually, as well as having a career in some type of conservation. So I think it's just become more of a norm. And when people look back through history and back to, I was thinking of the days of DDT and the impacts on the wildlife and birds from DDT, and how changing that one thing and using, identifying what that problem was that was causing, eggs to collapse and young to perish, and changing that one thing from we're not using that chemical anymore to we're doing something else, and the resilience and the comeback of those wildlife populations. There's been a couple of generations of folks that have lived through that and see that change that's been made just from changing one thing and using one different type of pesticide. So I think that people are just more aware of the needs to be conservative or conservationists and really make a difference, even if it's just changing one thing.
That's great. You mentioned the DDT. I'm reading a book on the history of wildlife conservation, and it's a complaint I have about all these history books is for the first 150 years of conservation, there was one person at a time making a difference. It was Huxley or Leopold or even Carson. But then the moment Stuart Udall got involved, everybody was there. And that the last few chapters of the book are just packed with people. And I think that really speaks to your point.
Yeah, it's become a popular thing to do or be part of, but it's also become known over the last 30 years that some changes needed to be made and that everybody could have a role in making some little change in their life to make a difference.
That's great. Melissa, how have you seen conservation change and what's the state?
Yeah, I think especially here in Colorado, and I mean, we saw this around the world with the onset of the pandemic, people really starting to more fully understand their impact on our natural world. And I think especially here, when we just saw such a huge increase in visitation in public open spaces and the demand for it, there was a mad rush to figure out how to educate all these seemingly new users of these spaces, how to be good stewards and how to appropriately welcome everybody in and make it feel like a truly inclusive space and a safe place to be. And so I feel like, as tragic and horrific as the pandemic has been, it's really shed a lot of light, like Patricia was saying, on the need for this. And I think that as people are continuing to want to, maintain that in their lifestyles, this connection to the outdoors, they're starting to recognize that there are so many opportunities for them to engage in the work that protects the outdoors. And we, in our coalition, we're so heavily focused on private land conservation that we really hope to sort of like use that momentum around this attention to protecting these places, and now all of the attention to protecting public lands, to also talk about the need for private land conservation, and that it's sometimes a missing piece of that puzzle in that conversation. So I see it in a really positive, highly optimistic. I think we're getting to a point now where a lot more people who maybe are a non-traditional population to engage in these conversations. They're living in urban centers, but really are interested in knowing, what are the conservation efforts happening specifically here in Colorado or within their community. And that's really exciting to see, and for people to start to recognize what true impact we're having, whether it's in recreating or just our daily lives, and how much water we talk about that in my household all the time, because my kid leaves the water running while he's brushing his teeth and it makes me crazy. So, I think that there's just a greater recognition of, what's our true impact here, and that it's harmful if we're not paying attention.
Yeah. Audrey.
So there's one demographic that I keep hearing over and over, and that is that the population in Colorado and most of the Western states is going to double in the next 30 years. It's a little scary to think about, but, and there are a lot of people moving to Colorado. And I think that most of those people are coming here because they like what Colorado has to offer in outdoor recreational opportunities. And I think that most of those people do have a conservation ethic, and they want to see open spaces, even private land that's being conserved. They enjoy seeing the open spaces, and people come here to hunt and hike and fish and camp and raft and ski and just be in the outdoors. And I think it's more, so I feel like conservation is now more important than ever, because going to be fighting this issue of more population in our state. And yet everybody, I think most people want to see more conserved lands. And so I just feel like the whole issue is going to be more important than it ever was before. And people are more aware of it and it's more important to them.
Sure. Yeah, a common sentiment that my friends and I share is the danger of loving the land to death.
Yeah.
Right? It's great that people are coming out, but what do they know and how do they know it? And are we only going to be able to enjoy the recreation for a generation, or can we continue it on for the next generation and more to come?
Right.
Yeah. Wow. Well, the last question I have here is, and Audrey, you can start with this one. What is one conservation project you've worked on in your career that you are really proud of, that you can hold up and say, this is something that I conserved?
So for about a little over 20 years, I worked with a ranch in Oak Creek. And we just did continual improvements projects over the years. And it was really nice to see those projects add up. We started with improving the irrigation system for the hay meadows and some irrigated pasture. And we did some wildlife habitat improvements, repaired some ponds, and addressed an issue of some forested areas that had a lot of beetle kill trees. And so it was just like one project after another, over this time span of 20 years. It's really nice to look at that property and go, wow, this is what it used to look like, and this is what it looks like now. I feel pretty proud of that.
That's great. Thank you. Patricia, would you like to go next?
Sure, that was an easy answer for me. If you've been in Grand County for a while, you've been to Strawberry Lake up above Lake Granby, and we were working on a land exchange with Winter Park Resort 20 years ago. And one of the parcels that we were trying to get in that land exchange dropped out, and the facilitator of the exchange asked what else I wanted to have in there, and I said I want Strawberry Lake. And I thought that was totally pie in the sky. I'd never get it involved, included in the package, and we did. And so when I go there and see that beautiful lake with the special wetlands around it, and there's some orchids that are a sensitive species up there, and I go up there and know that I had a hand in getting that into public land management and public ownership, and that everybody can enjoy that. I feel really happy about that.
That's great. Thank you for that. I know that a lot of folks in Grand County really appreciate that.
And a little known fact about Strawberry Lake, for all y'all hippies, that was the original site of the first Rainbow Family Gathering in 1972 or 3.
Mm-hmm. Any plans to bring that back?
No.
Not on forest land, I guess.
Well, I can't say that.
And Melissa, in your career, what's a project that you really are proud of?
Yeah, I haven't done a whole lot of on the ground conservation work in my last career. I will say I was really proud of the ability in a public agency, a local public agency, work for a metro district in the south side of the Front Range here. And we were constantly having this debate amongst the community around this balance of like how many trails in our open space versus how much preservation type conservation we needed to do. And so I'm just really proud of the ability to kind of bring that community together around this notion of what does conservation mean to you, and what does it need to look like for this community. And, it was, I think, at times very heated because it can be for people. But overall, I think that because there was such a strong ethic of caring for and connecting to that landscape for that community, that's part of what really drove me to conservation. And then the other thing that I'm super proud of is just Keep It Colorado. Like, we relaunched this organization kind of from scratch, and we were really, really fortunate to have our core membership with us through the whole evolution and stick with us now. But I'm just really proud of the fact that we are standing on our own as this organization and starting to really be involved in bigger conversations around the state on what planning for conservation looks like here, and across the country, and what private land conservation planning is going to look like for, you know, similar organizations across the country as well. So really proud of what we've been able to do with the coalition and the community that we continue to convene, and you know, really excited about what it'll hopefully mean for conservation in the future.
Yeah, I remember, I think I was maybe a week into this position and my board sent me to that conference in Grand Junction, planning for Keep It Colorado, and I had no idea, but Jordan Vanna was there and he took my hand and showed me around, and I feel very honored to have Keep It Colorado in Colorado, because I know a lot of other states don't have the coalitions, or their coalitions might not be up and running. So thank you very much for all the work you do too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jeremy, can I add another one?
Yes, of course.
I just wanted to say, so your organization holds conservation easements on more than 60 private properties. And I think I did baseline studies for maybe around 20 of those. So when I drive by one of those properties, just knowing that I played a small part in having those properties preserved and in perpetuity, that they'll never be developed, that's really, really cool. I'm sure you feel the same way, and it's awesome to know that those properties will remain in open space, and not only will the landowner enjoy the benefits, but all of the neighbors and anybody that, you know, uses that area. It's just it's really nice to know that those properties will never be developed.
Yeah, and not so small. Baseline reports are pretty significant. Yeah.
Well, but compared to the work you do to do a conservation easement, my part was easy.
Well, I appreciate that. So we have about 15 minutes left, and we do have two guests here, Lisa and Virgil. If either of you have questions, I can ask you to unmute, or you can put it in the chat. Let's see if this works. So if either of you have questions, feel free to speak up. Okay. Well, the invitation is there. I guess we can also close out. If you do have any final words, Patricia, Melissa, and Audrey, for our audience and for everyone listening in. We've talked about a bunch of different organizations. I will have the links to those organization websites when we post this on YouTube and on social media, so you can continue learning. And if anyone is interested in learning more, talking with any of us, feel free to contact the Land Trust, and my email will be in the description as well. Lisa, yeah, you turned on.
Hi.
Hi.
I've been listening. Thank you very much, guys. Great information. And I was just wondering, what volunteer jobs might there be in the county or with any of your organizations that you work with? Anything coming up over the summer?
Sure. In Grand County specifically?
Yes.
Okay. Audrey, since you're up, I don't know if you know of any.
I'm thinking.
And I can always contact you guys,
Yeah.
you know, later on, or, you know, get a hold of you. And if anything comes up that, you know, I might be interested in, then maybe we can talk then.
Sure. Patricia or Melissa, do you have any volunteer projects?
Well, I always put a plug in for National Public Lands Day, which is at the end of the summer.
Mhm.
And it's a shared project between the Park Service, BLM,
Forest
and then
Service.
there's usually Forest Service, yeah, Park Service, BLM, and then there's usually one project on private land. And Headwaters Trails Alliance coordinates a lot of that, as does the Forest Service. So if you just Google National Public Lands Day in Grand County, I think that you will get that. And I believe that's on September 25th this year.
Yep.
HTA does lead a bunch of trail projects, and we're a little uncertain of what the volunteer opportunities are going to be at the local ranger district this year just because of the COVID situation. And I know last year they weren't utilizing volunteers very much, but you could contact this local ranger district and see what they have coming up, and definitely HTA. And of course, the Park Service at County Chief Visitor Center.
Okay. Well, thank
And
you.
the Land Trust. I am on the steering committee for National Public Lands Day in the county.
Oh, good.
And
Okay.
so feel free to contact me as well. And this year we do have a few projects lined up, but my big contribution to the committee is a picnic in the park that evening in Granby at Palamas Park. We'll have representatives from the agencies there, and hopefully, this is not a promise, but we are trying to get in touch with Smokey and see if Smokey Bear will make an appearance.
Okay. Another opportunity is the Grand County Wilderness Group, and they have they staff our 2 wilderness cabins at Monarch Lake and up at above Devil's Thumb. So they do staffing up there, but they also need people to go check the trail registers. So if you want kind of an independent project, they have trail registers that they do the monitoring of those sign-in sheets. So you
Right.
might check those folks out and see what they have to offer too.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a few other resources too. They're not necessarily Grand County specific, but I always recommend checking out Volunteers for Outdoor Colorado, was mentioned earlier. So it's V as in Victor, OC.org, and they will have projects all over the state, but you can look and see what they've got available in Grand County. I think they're a great organization to just start to, get involved with. They do stewardship and trail building. And then there's a listserv called the COSA, Colorado Open Space Alliance listserv. And they will have jobs at all levels, including volunteer opportunities, all of the time. Caveat, they're all types of jobs all over this state and others, but every once in a while you'll see something that's right, in your home neck of the woods, or a local, open space agency or organization, nonprofit will post there. And then we have a jobs board. We from time to time do have volunteer opportunities up on our board as well, depending on if our members share that with us. A lot of times it tends to be full-time positions, but they'll be across the state as well. So,
Okay. Thank you.
And I don't know if Grand County has this, but some counties have a volunteer clearinghouse where they have a listing of all volunteer opportunities in the county. So I would check with Grand County on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for asking, Lisa. That's great.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Great question.
Do you have any others?
Nope, I don't right now, but I do have everybody's information, so I can always contact you guys later on.
That's right. Well, with that, Audrey, do you have any closing words for everybody?
Don't want to say thinking.
That's my word.
I know. I'm thinking that I don't want to say I would say just for anyone that's looking at getting into the field of conservation, just try a lot of different things and see what's out there, and talk to people about what they do. Ask somebody, hey, can I take you to coffee? And I just want to pick your brain about what is it that you do, and would you recommend getting into this field? And I think people are super friendly and always willing to share advice.
That's great. Patricia?
I would say find your passion and write your story.
Short and sweet.
Mhm.
Good. And Melissa, final word?
Final words. Oh, so much pressure. I will echo a little bit of what Audrey said. I think that this community, the conservation community at large, is very warm and welcoming, and people don't fight. So call and ask for time. People are willing to give it and are usually pretty eager to talk about, what they do, because most of them seem to really love it. And don't be afraid of a crooked career path. Mine is very crooked and weird, and it's worked out great. And I think that that's important to remember too, is that it's okay if you've come from a different background or a different, seemingly entirely different skill set or education base. If you're really interested in this work, you'll find a place. you'll find somewhere to plug in.
That's great. Thank you. And thank you for everyone for joining us or watching the recording. Like I said earlier, a lot of the information that we spoke about today, the websites will be in the YouTube description and on social media. And if you do want to get in touch with anybody, feel free to email me, jeremy@coloradoheadwaterslandtrust.org. It's a long one, but it all makes sense. And I look forward to hearing from everybody and seeing a whole lot more people in the field of conservation moving forward.
Thank you
Thank you.
very much, everybody.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Jeremy.
Jeremy, for setting this up.
Of course.
Yeah, thank
Thanks
you.
for joining. Good night.